Welcome to the Dream Show. I'm Jane Teresa Anderson, and this is episode 290. And I've just finished recording the conversation with my guest, Barbara Courtille, the author of Buddhism for Yogis, who lives on Cammeraygal land in Sydney, Australia. And we explored her dream and then looked at how it relates to her life. So Barbara Courtille is the author of Buddhism for Yogis and Philosophy on the Mat. She's a yoga educator, a writer, and an artist who lives on Cammeraygal land in Sydney, Australia. Since her yoga journey began in the late 1980s, she's been a teacher, a trainer, and a mentor to many. And now she supports teachers through her weekly Yoga Teachers blog. And she continues to deepen her spiritual connection through her art, study, and practice. So in today's episode, first up, Barbara shares her dream. And as always, I ask our guests not to tell me anything about their dream until we start recording. In my work with clients, I ask people to send me their dreams the day before, so I have time to consider them before we speak. But I know from feedback with our audience that you enjoy hearing how the process unfolds when I have no prior knowledge of the dream. So after we explore the dream and look at how it connects with Barbara's life, we then go into a wide-ranging conversation about her yoga practice, how she got into teaching, how she got into mentoring and educating, and a lovely dive into her book, particularly the second book, Buddhism for Yogis, which is actually, despite what the title says, actually a really accessible book for anybody at all interested in just leading a better life with a kind of with some Buddhist reflections, helping them out there. We also look at her work as an artist and various other things as well. We take the conversation where it flows. But before we go to that conversation, here's a reminder of my dream resources. My website is janeteresa.com. That's Teresa without an H, where you can listen to every episode of The Dream Show right back to episode 1. You can also access the most recent ones, or actually I think all of them these days, on all the usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. Also on my website, you can read hundreds of blogs on dreams and dreaming that I've written over the years, and you can find out about my books, my courses, and how to consult me about your dreams. And at the end of my chat with Barbara, we share her contact details, and these are also in the show notes. So, on with the show. Welcome to the Dream Show, Barbara.
Hi, Jane. Great to see you.
Lovely to see you too. And I know our listeners can only hear us, but of course I get the joy of actually watching you on Zoom while we do this. And I can see you're dressed all summery. You're from Sydney. You're in Sydney, Australia. And have you been to the beach or anything this morning? You look beachified.
Yeah. It's very hot here in Sydney. I went for a beautiful swim, which was just absolutely divine. I'm making the most of the end of summer, so getting down there as much as I can while the water's still nice and warm. And then I had lunch with my lovely dad down there. So it's been a wonderful Friday.
I hope the wonderful sense continues as we talk about your dream and have a chat about all sorts of things, but especially about your book, which I am really enjoying, but we'll talk about that later. But first of all, of course, as always, I have no idea what your dream is. So if you'd like to tell me, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I had a dream this morning. I haven't remembered my dream for a while, and I was a bit concerned that I wouldn't have a fresh one for you, but I did get one this morning. Thank you, subconscious. When I woke up, I forgot it, and I was like, oh, no. And then I just lay there still, just going, okay, just lay there, don't think. And then it kind of came back, but not all of it, but probably enough for you because I know you're very intuitive. So the dream is that I'm with an ex-boyfriend of mine, and the dream takes place just after I've broken up with him. And we're just having a conversation. He's very sad and heartbroken, and I'm just listening, being quite compassionate and just listening to what he's saying. I don't remember what he said. And then I go down the end of the backyard, I think it is. There's like, I think that's where I work. Maybe it's some kind of studio space. And then when I come back into my apartment. It's in the kitchen. It's very white. There's lots of light. And I notice that he's been there and he has left what I interpret to be these little clues for me, these little cryptic kind of things. So there's a book that's open at a particular passage, and there's a few things like that. But I don't remember what the passage actually says. And in the dream, I'm looking at this and I don't sort of decipher the exact message, but it's to do with his heartbreak type thing. So he's broken into my place, basically, is the gist of this. But I'm not upset in the dream. I'm quite calm, and I'm empathetic towards him. And then I go out again, go back to, I think it's the studio at the end of the garden or the backyard. And then I come back again, same place. This time he's broken in again, but what he's done this time is he's rearranged the clock. So I'll have all these clocks around, like little ones and bigger ones, and he's like, some he's tipped over, some he's changed. So he's kind of done things with the clock. And again, I'm thinking, well, there's some kind of cryptic message. I don't really know what the message is. So I just rearrange things back to what they were. But again, my reaction is fairly calm, and I'm quite understanding in the dream. Like, I'm not upset that he's broken into my place again. In reality, I would not be this calm and this empathetic.
It's a very Buddhist approach, Barbara, in your dream, not in real life. Very compassionate. I was writing your dream down as you were talking. Compassionate, empathetic, understanding, all very, very good Buddhist qualities that you're bringing there in your dream. But of course, although you would not be that empathetic, compassionate or whatever in real life, if your ex-boyfriend or anybody broke into your house, remembering this is a dream and everyone and everything in a dream represents a part of yourself, it kind of shifts and changes a bit, doesn't it? You know, yeah. You said at the bottom of the garden there's a kind of place which might be a studio. Any kind of feeling apart from it being studio, what kind of energy that place had?
Quite an energy which is quite what's the word? Something that envelops you, something that I'm enveloped in. Quite a focused energy, I guess. A place where I go to just be in a focus, like away from everything.
Yes, focused and away from everything. Would that be away from things that are upsetting you, or just away from things that are interrupting your flow or your work? Or
yeah, I think an absorbing place where I can just be in the flow, the creative flow, without all these hassles like relationships.
And break-ins. So you've got the start of the dream, it's an ex-boyfriend, and it's just after the breakup. And I don't know how many ex-boyfriends you've got, but presumably more than one. And I wonder why your dream might have chosen this particular one. Would you like to put 3 words for how you would describe that boyfriend, not in the dream, but as you knew him in life? 3 kind of words that might describe his personality.
Yeah, so he was a very sweet guy, very quite conventional. I think of him as kind of like the nice boy next door, the kind of guy that your mum loves, kind of guy that your mum wished that you would stay with, that kind of person. I found him quite a bit dull, to be honest. But he was lovely and he adored me and he treated me really well. And I did not maybe return the favor.
Yeah, okay. So he was sweet, conventional, kind of like a nice boy next door, but you found them dull. You wanted a bit more what?
At that stage of my life, I was very young in my
Yeah.
20s. I was at art school. It was very exciting. I was very absorbed, like in the dream, and
Yes.
I was with my people, and it was a really great, exciting, wonderful time of my life. And he was a bit of a rebound boyfriend. So before him, I'd had a long relationship with another boyfriend who I was much more into. And this guy, even though he was tall and handsome and ticked all the boxes, I just wasn't into him that much.
Yeah. Okay, so he also symbolizes the time when you were really engaged with your art and that was exciting. And as you say, in a sense, a bit like being in the studio, focused and engaged. And he was the exact opposite to that, really. So the start of a dream often describes the situation in your life now that the rest of the dream goes on to explore. So straight up the front, you've got some kind of feeling about, I could be in a kind of conventional situation, but I don't really want to be in that situation. I'd feel quite dull. I actually prefer being in the flow, particularly maybe in my art, and whether the art is your art or your writing art will come on later. I want to be in the flow. I want to be in the passion. I want to be in the excitement, the kind of excitement I had back then, and that you've probably just had with writing your book, but we'll go into that later. So there's this kind of conflict between that state and flow that I want to be in and this other conventional, nice kind of but dull way of being. But that said, the beginning of the dream is also there's been a breakup. So you could also say at this time in your life now, there's somewhere where you have kind of made a breakup, broken free from a situation which is beginning to feel a bit dull and conventional and keeping you away from your passion and your flow and what you really want to be involved in. And part of you is a bit sad about that because he was sad in the dream. Part of you that maybe would want to take a conventional approach or be nice or be sweet is a bit sad, but you have compassion for that part of yourself because really and truly you just want to be totally focused and involved in what you're doing. And so at that point in the garden, you do go down there in the dream, you do go down to the end of the garden to get that. And hey, it's really lovely and you're involved. But then, of course, you've got to come back to everyday daily life and have another look. And this time you're in your kitchen and you said it was very light and very white. Is that like your kitchen in your actual home?
No, this one was kind of higher up, whiter and had more light than my actual kitchen.
And what feeling did that give you in the dream as a kitchen?
It's a nice kitchen, nice place. Higher. Where I live is kind of quite light as well, but it's low down. I'm down rather than up. But where I used to live before, I used to be up. I like being higher up.
Yes. So you've done your lovely, I'm back in the flow at the end of the garden and everything's all good. Now I can come back home and I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling up. Maybe I'm feeling uplifted. It's a kitchen. That's where we nurture and cook for ourselves as well. So this is feeling really good. But, there's been a break-in. There's been the really nice, sweet, conventional kind of energy that is also a bit dull has somehow seeped into my home here. But if I look around, there's a few cryptic clues. There's a book with a passage. I can't quite remember what it is, but there's something, there's something around me. There's something within myself, within Barbara, that is trying to give me a message, a clue as to how to deal with not having to do the dull things, but be in the flow of things and keep feeling uplifted. And, you still got a sense that he is feeling, the ex-boyfriend in the dream is feeling broken and heartbroken, but you're calm. So there's still a sense within you that you're acknowledging some heartbreak within yourself at some point, some sense of, I was involved in something that was maybe conventional, maybe sweet, maybe nice, and I'm kind of heartbroken that I have to break up with that, but I have to plunge right back into my passion, really. And then you go down to the studio, you do that, you go and plunge into your passion, you come back for another go, and this time it's rearranged the clock. So I don't know, what's that, rearranging the timing, turning time upside down? What feeling did you get from the clocks?
It was a bit quirky. And I was surprised that I had so many clocks. There's about 5 or 6 of them. I remember I had another boyfriend before this one who gave me a clock for Valentine's Day, like an old-fashioned clock with the little bells on the thing. And I remember because he used to work in advertising, there was this whole lead up to it. Like every day I would get a parcel saying, oh, the time's nearly here. And then the next day I'd get another parcel in this box. So it was a very creative kind of thing. So I don't know why I thought of that, but I did.
Well, whenever we're talking about our dreams, we get very helpful hints from our unconscious mind, which contribute cryptic messages, not from books, but this time from our conversation. So what you associated with the clocks in the dream then was a memory of clocks that were involved in a lead up to something, and they were also involved in a very clever advertising campaign. Of course, you and I are probably thinking about all your book promotions that you're doing at the moment at this stage. So the clocks has something to do with an advertising campaign or a big lead up to something. I think you said there were 5 or 6 clocks in the dream. So you may be looking at 5 or 6 weeks or 5 or 6 months or something like that. But the sense that they're all turned around and everything. So it's, what the next 5 or 6 weeks, 5 or 6 months, my time, my advertising, my campaigning, my lead ups to something is all a bit topsy-turvy. And in the dream, I don't like this. I want to just put them back to where they were, because probably I really just want to go back down to the end of the garden and get in my studio and really focus on stuff. So as a starting point or an ending point, how do you relate to that?
I think what you just said then triggered, like at the moment, I am applying for a creative grant with the council, and I think I've got about that amount of time to get it together. So, as with all grant applications, it's a conventional process to go through, which is a little bit, I'm trying to make it okay and just doing little bits. I mean, I'm quite excited about it because I've got a good idea about what I want to do and I'm confident about my idea. But the whole process, actually, I've never applied for a grant in my life because of the very process of it. So this is a new thing for me to actually, I'm committed to do this, to give it a go. But it is something that once upon a time, I'm not doing that. I just really hate that kind of stuff.
That's wonderful. Congratulations for taking that step and committing to it. That sounds absolutely awesome. And I'm dying to ask, but I'm not, where it's going to lead to, because that's all a big secret at the moment, probably. So I love in the dream that you take a very Buddhist approach to this. So although this is really annoying and boring and dull and conventional, I'm committed to doing this, and I'm being compassionate and I'm being empathetic and I'm being understanding. I wonder why do you think there's a part in the dream, the ex-boyfriend representing heartbreak? Where's the kind of heartbreak or the sadness that you're being compassionate about there?
I'm not sure about that bit. I'm not sure about what it is that I'm letting go of or breaking up with. I'm not getting that.
Yeah, it'll come later, but it could be breaking up with your usual ways of approaching things, because this is doing something in an entirely different way, going for the filling in the form and applying for the grant. So, maybe on one level, the sadness is for, the old way, I would just, whatever it was you would just do, I would just plunge in and do it, or I would do this, or I would do that. And so maybe there's some sadness that I'm opting for this conventional way of doing things, and but, probably going to lead to a good place. So I think one of the standouts from the dream, before we move on to talking about your book and things, is that one of the really positive symbols is that lovely studio space at the end of the garden. It's like you have to keep going down there in order to come back and deal with the break-in, deal with this thought of what's breaking into my life now, and as you've described it, what's breaking into your, in the dream, it's your apartment or your house, but that's representing what's breaking into my inner world. And what's breaking into my inner world, as you said, is the sense of this ex-boyfriend. It's the dullness, it's the form filling, it's the applying for the grant application. This keeps breaking into my inner world, but I can cope with this by just going down to the end of the garden, getting back into the studio and into my flow. So I hope and I imagine that you are doing that. Are you finding time to do your whatever it is that feels like the flow in the studio to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm only doing this grant thing in very small, bite-sized pieces. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
That's really great. And maybe that sense also at the end of the dream where you turn the clocks around and put them back to where they were is a sense of getting my time back. I also want to make sure whatever happens that this doesn't escalate out of my control and I still have control of my time or how I want to spend my time, something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a tendency to pick up too many projects. So I'm trying to sort of like finish one thing at a time rather than have a million things on and get overwhelmed. And I've
Yeah.
been quite good at being like, I am very creative at the moment. I have been for a while. I want to stay in that flow, and I'm quite a little bit precious about anything that gets in the way.
Yes. Yes, which anything that breaks into my life and gets in the way and introduces more clocks than I need, more projects than I need, more deadlines than I need. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the boyfriend represents someone because when I was with him, like it was hard to get rid of him, like that annoying feeling of just go away. Like, when you break up with someone and they won't accept that. I was thinking
Yes.
about that this morning. Like I've had a lot of boyfriends like that. Whereas when someone breaks up with me, I don't go like I just get it. Like I deal with it. I don't go back crawling back. Like, why would you do that? But people do.
See, another shining Buddhist attribute. You just let go. No attachment there. That was good. Time moves on
Yeah.
in the now moment. So so you've got that beautifully in your dream. There, making sure not too many clocks, not too many break-ins of any unconscious part of yourself that wants to come back and say, but what if you're letting go of this or you're letting go of that or you're letting go of this project or this approach to life, or you've got 10 million exciting projects you want to do. Any heartbreak that you can't do those, your dream is reminding you, no, with the new focus, the new Barbara is one project at a time and making sure I get time in my studio at the end of the straight. And on that one project at the time, you have just released your book, Buddhism for Yogis, which is your second book, which I am halfway through, and then I sped read the rest just before talking with you, and I'm really enjoying it. It's an excellent book. Congratulations. And although it's called Buddhism for Yogis, I have to say that, reading it myself, I think you don't have to be a yogi to get an enormous amount out of that book. It's so accessibly written. It's beautifully written. It's very interesting, and it's certainly packed full of stuff for yogi teachers and practitioners. But I think it's also for the everyday person. But I understand that from a marketing perspective, we have to focus our books for a particular audience. But I think if anyone listening is interested at all in Buddhism, put into an everyday understandable concept, but also very deeply, then I'd recommend your book. But let's go back a bit first. Before you could write Buddhism for Yogi, you became a yogi yourself at some stage, as I'm sure many of our listeners did too. So when did you first discover yoga?
I think like in the 80s when I was about 19, I had a boyfriend who was a yogi. Well, he was a Buddhist and he used to practice yoga, and we lived together for quite a long time. And he used to, I was into my art and he was into his yoga. And I remember he used to get up very early and do handstands and headstands. And that was just his thing. And I had my thing. And he took me to a yoga class one day, which wasn't very, very good, actually. I think I've probably told this story before. It's one of my stories that this woman wanted me to do a handstand or something, and I'd never done yoga before. Like it was just one of those classic, oh my
Terrible
God,
class, yeah. And
terrible
you were a
class.
failure because you couldn't do one. Or was it still close enough to your childhood to be able to do a handstand then?
Well, this is the thing. I never did handstands in my childhood. I was not a handstand child. And this woman assumed that I should have been a handstand child. I was an arty, bookish kid. I was not an athletic kind of person at all.
But somehow you did become a yogi. So
Yeah,
what
but I'm not
point?
an athletic yogi.
No. At what point did it stick and pull you in?
So I did that so I used to, so then I got into yoga because I went into a different I found other types of yoga, hatha yoga or some other things. And I don't know. I think when you practice for a very long time, it just grows on you, doesn't it?
Becomes part of life, part of
At
your
first,
life.
just something you do a few times a week, and then you go every day, and then it's before you know it, it's your life.
And before you know it, you become a yoga teacher as you did. What was the turning point there? What made you decide, okay, all right, I'll teach?
It was after a particular class in 2009. So 2009, I was going through a very difficult time with another boyfriend. Gosh, just boyfriends everywhere. Um, a very difficult breakup with another boyfriend who wouldn't leave me alone, wouldn't go away. And I was in a very bad state, lots of rumination. And when I think back, I was a very anxious young person, but I didn't know it. Because everyone
Yeah.
in my family is kind of anxious. It's just normal. It's only now that I look back and I look at my behavior and I go, geez, like I was so reactive and so defensive and yeah, all that stuff.
You don't know till you look back with wisdom, do you at all?
Exactly. Don't, and I had so much rumination. I really did. I used to just obsess about stuff. If something would go wrong, I would just obsess, thinking, should have done this, I should have said that over and over, like absolute torture. My mind actually just tortured me. Like a lot of people, I'm not alone in this.
Oh, no.
Um, so anyway, that's the state that I was in. And I went to a Iyengar class, and the woman was very particular about feet. I remember that. She was an ex-dancer who'd had some kind of injury, and she'd kind of like fixed herself with Iyengar yoga. So she was very passionate, and she was very much into all the bones and things, which is not my thing. I'm not really into that kind of yoga, really. But for some reason, I think she just exhausted me mentally. So when it got to Shavasana, which I never used to be able to do either because my mind would always race.
Just interrupting for our audience, Shavasana's the bit at the end of yoga where you lay on the floor and totally relax, close your eyes, float away. Keep going.
Yeah. Shavasana corpse pose when you're supposed to practice the art of dying peacefully, which is not what I used to do.
What did you used to do?
I used to ruminate and think about all the things I was, my to-do list. That's what I used to do in Shavasana. So I wasn't trying to do Shavasana because I'd given up on meditation years before this. I mean, I've been doing yoga a long time, but I was one of those people, like there are many. I can't meditate. I think too much, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't trying to meditate, but it just happened in this particular class.
Because she had exhausted you.
I don't know what it was, Jane. It was just time for me to experience this experience. But what happened after that samadhi moment, I call it, which was very brief, but it was powerful enough that I just went, oh, that's what they're talking about. All that stress and all that worry and all that anxiety suddenly gone. And I was like, all right. And from that moment on, I meditated every single day of my life.
That's brilliant. That's so fantastic. And that alone was the big step in reducing your rumination and your anxiety and your stress.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, it took a long time.
Yes.
But it was just interesting that this experience came so suddenly, and then I got it.
Yeah, and that was the point at which you said, okay, I'm going to become a teacher.
Then I was like, I've got to teach this. But it was much more focused on meditation, not so much asana, which is what a lot of teachers teach.
The physical
It was very
yoga.
much meditation focused in the beginning. And then later on, after I'd been teaching meditation for some time, then I did my teacher training and started teaching more, vinyasa and then yin, then sound healing, then all the things.
And did you reach a point where you were teaching all the time and not attending classes? Were you doing your yoga at home? Did you ever get sort of deluged where this has become work? Something I love doing has become work, or were you able to keep the balance?
I was teaching a lot just before COVID. I was teaching probably 20 classes a week, something
Whoa.
like that. Yeah, so I was teaching a lot, but I still was very, very passionate about it. And then when COVID came and we all had to do the whole online thing, that's when it started going south in terms of my passion and enthusiasm.
And was that the doorway to becoming the big shift that you made to becoming a mentor or an educator for yoga teachers?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Was
Yeah.
that a sudden, was that also like a sudden thing that dropped into a meditation, or was it something that grew gradually for you?
No, it's something that came very organically and not something that I would have ever have expected or desired, or it was very organic.
Yeah. And how did it work for people listening? What was the actual, what was it like? How did you work with people? What kind of resources did you provide them?
Everything was online. Oh, it feels like such a long time ago now when we talk about COVID. Well, it does
It
to
does.
me.
It seems ages. It's
Oh,
just a different
so much,
reality.
so much happened. And during that time, my mum was dying as well. So I had my own personal trauma as well as the universal global trauma. And so it all feels like a bit of a blur, but I buried myself in my work. And because everything was online, I got burnt out very quickly and it was not healthy.
Yeah.
And that's when I got into social media. Like I never used to use Instagram. I mean, I had Facebook, but it was more just a social thing for friends. It wasn't a thing that engrossed my life. But then Instagram, because all the yogis were on Instagram doing all of the things which I got into. I got completely obsessed with the whole Instagram thing. And it took up my whole time and it was very unhealthy.
It was unhealthy, but I have to say, because I saw some of it, that you were actually being the artist you are. You did some amazing stuff. I mean, there were like mini movies that you did, very very clever, very funny, very educational. You just drew on so much creativity. So I can imagine. I understand that you got obsessed, but I can also understand that it was probably a creative outlet for you. And I know that you got a huge following of people that were really interested in what you were doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, it kind of rescued me, but also, yeah,
It burnt you out.
both extremes.
Yeah. But that was where you realized that you were fulfilling a function as an educator. But then you dropped the burnout part and the social media part. And is that where you decided to write your first book?
Hmm. I can't remember the decision-making process. I mean, I think it's from I had a blog. So I had a blog for quite a long time, which I still have, that comes out every week. And I think it's from writing the blog that I thought I was studying yoga philosophy. I think it's from I was studying yoga philosophy. I was writing my blogs. I was writing a lot about yoga philosophy. And then I thought, oh, I really should write about this because there's a lot of yoga teachers that don't understand this. There's a lot of yoga teachers that think that the Yoga Sutras are yoga philosophy. And I was one of those. So I understand. It's like, but there's all this other stuff. So that's when I thought I need to write a book about this because there's actually not one that explains it in a very easy way,
Yes.
without all the scholarly Sanskrit rah rah.
Yeah.
So I felt that there was a need for that book, and that's why I wrote it. And I was writing about that stuff in my blogs anyway. So it was just a way to put it all in one place.
Yes. And that was philosophy on the mat. And
Philosophy on the mat. And once I started writing, I got into it.
you discovered that you really like writing
I
as well
just,
as the subject.
yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
when did that come out? Feels like about a year, or is it a year or two ago?
Yeah, that was, I think, February 24.
24. So within a year, you'd written your second book already, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I was very focused, like I wrote every day.
I was going to ask you that. What was your writing discipline? Because you obviously have a yoga practice discipline, you have an art discipline, which I'll ask you about later. And anybody that's ever written will know that you really do need some kind of discipline. So how do you fit all these, going back to your dream, the sort of horror of having a dull and conventional life and being organized by 5 clocks? How do you fit having the flow of your creative life with the discipline of yoga practice, of writing practice? What is your writing practice?
So I am very disciplined and organized, unlike a lot of artists. So that's been a really good skill for me. I've always been like that. So in the morning, I do my admin, which includes my social media and my blogs and blah, blah. Then I have my yoga practice. So I try to get out of the house to do that. I'll go to a studio and do some yoga practice. And then in the afternoon is my writing time, as in whatever it is that I'm doing. But I also do creative writing as an antidote to the more scholarly nonfiction. So I've got a fiction writing and nonfiction writing.
Oh, I can relate to that. I can relate to that so strongly. Isn't it lovely to write fiction and it doesn't have to be true? I didn't know you were writing fiction. What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm writing plays, theatre plays. Because now,
of course, I forgot that. Yeah.
So that's fun writing. So I've got what I consider serious writing and fun writing, but I love all the writing.
Didn't you have some kind of accolade? Didn't you put on a play recently in Sydney? Do I remember?
Yeah, there's a play. I wrote a short play that was in a festival last year, and it's in a festival at the moment again. But I've written longer plays as well. So that's my creative new kind of like my new challenging thing. It's always good to have a challenge.
So in the afternoon, when you have your writing practice, you go, okay, I'm going to do this amount of time on my non-fiction and this on my fiction, or is it whatever the project is at the moment, but it's your writing time?
The first version.
The first, so you get the non-fiction done first, which is not the dull conventional bit, but it's the less exciting bit than the fiction bit.
Yeah. The fiction is kind of like the ice cream
that you get afterwards, and the cherry on top as well. The reward.
Yeah.
So
then I have a break, and that's kind of like breaking from daytime to nighttime. I like to relax. If I'm not going out or whatever, then I like to maybe meditate or something like that. And then I paint in the evening.
The art comes in the evening. So is the art discipline that this is what I do in the evening, or do you have other structures around your art discipline as well? This relates back originally, of course, to, as you said earlier, that you did a fine art degree, which was painting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been painting forever. So it's not a new thing, but the structure has changed to fit in all these other things.
Can you begin to see these clocks in the kitchen from a maybe different light as well? But it works for you and it's great. And I love the fact that you've got these structures because, to be honest, things only get done by being organised and having structure in reality, don't they? Otherwise, there's all sorts of unfinished projects all over the place or mad ideas that never happen. You've got to have that discipline to be able to do that. But then as an artist, as such as you are with your fine art and with your writing and with your yoga, in terms of it's an art in when you were a teacher in designing classes and also in all sorts of other related attitudes. So you've got this kind of freedom, which I guess like in the dream is the studio at the bottom of the garden. You've got all creative kind of bit, and then in the house is more that, okay, this is the organised structure. And maybe or maybe not relating to the dream. Sometimes that discipline can become overwhelming and verge on dull in itself because you haven't left enough space for the two feed each other, don't they? You've got to do the creative stuff to have something to feed into those disciplined writing times or art times, and you've got to have those disciplined writing and arting times in order to get your creativity out into the world and share it, which is a very human thing but also a very Buddhist thing as well. I want to read out the blurb on the back of your book, the Buddhism for Yogis. It says, Buddhism for Yogis, integrating Buddhist wisdom into your yoga practice. Explore the rich connections between yoga and Buddhism to deepen your teaching and practice. Buddhism for Yogis offers a clear and accessible introduction to Buddhist traditions from around the world, blending philosophy with practical tools for everyday life. It explains key Buddhist concepts and their alignment with yoga, showing how these two ancient traditions can support one another in cultivating mindfulness, compassion, and inner peace. For yoga teachers, this book provides practical guidance, including lesson plans, to help integrate Buddhist wisdom into classes. For practitioners, it offers meditations, mindfulness exercises, and simple practices to apply Buddhist teachings on and off the mat. Written with depth and clarity, Buddhism for Yogis is both an inspiring resource and a practical guide. It invites readers to explore the synergy between yoga and Buddhism and discover new pathways for personal and spiritual growth. And you've totally done that, Barbara. I love, it's actually only the last third of the book or quarter of the book where you go into the lesson plans for yoga teachers. As I said, the lead up is really an everyday person's. But, for any yoga teachers listening in, I'm not a yoga teacher, but I've been doing yoga for a long time, so I appreciate the art of planning classes. These are fantastic. I don't want to go into them in detail, but you've got whole lesson plans here, not about the physical poses themselves so much, or one or two are, but about how to introduce, about how to bring in different Buddhist concepts, the meditations, ideas for, exploring this new class. What is the standout part of the book that you are really most proud of?
Just getting it done. Just getting it done. It was really interesting to write. I really loved writing this one. I loved writing the other one as well, but I suppose this one had more surprises in it for me, perhaps. I was actually going to include Buddhism in my first book, even though my first book was about yoga philosophy because it's so related. But then the chapter on Buddhism was going to be too big. And that's why I ended up writing a whole book about it. And then I didn't want to confuse the two because that's another thing that happens.
Yeah, I think it works really well as a separate book, really, really well. You said, some things surprised you. And, as an author myself, I know exactly what you mean. It's you start to write a book on something that you are an expert in. And in having to frame how you write it, you discover more because you have to work out how to say things, and that leads you to new discoveries as well. But does something really stand out to you as something that you really gained for yourself from the process of writing it? An insight that hit you at a much deeper level than before?
I think I just like the story of the Buddha being this very extreme. I was thinking about this morning, this person who was living in luxury, in a palace, a prince, and had everything. And then when he steps out of the palace doors, he's in India, of course. And if you've been to India, we all get shocked when we go to India. So I sort of think of it as like it would have been what it would have been like for him when he first discovered, poverty and people, all the things. And it's a little bit like us in Australia because we live in we have a very comfortable life, generally speaking. And then when you go to somewhere like India, it's a huge shock.
Yes.
And it's interesting because India does have that pull for the spiritual journey. And so I love this story about this man who of course, people say that he was destined to be a Buddha and blah, blah, but he was still a person who had this very sheltered life and then saw this world, and instead of running from it, he was just like, no, I want to find out why people suffer and how can I help them? How can we alleviate that? And then he goes off and he goes and studies with the gurus, the yogis in the forest. And at that time, they were all practicing hatha yoga, as in the really forceful, full-on kriyas and all the, all the starving yourself and standing and like doing all these austerities, like really full on, not for the average person type of yoga. And he does all this stuff, and he's apparently a very good student, very good at meditate, and does it. He does it like he's got the tapas, he's got the fire, he's got the energy, he's got the desire, he's got the spiritual will, he's got everything, but nothing works. And then it doesn't, but does it? I mean, this is the question. Maybe, like me and my experience, you don't think it's working, and then one day it does.
Yes.
So I like this analogy that he kind of like, it's when he kind of gives up and goes, no, none of this stuff is working. I'm just going to sit under the Bodhi tree and I'm just going to wait until I get, and I'm not moving until that happens. And it's
And
kind of
overnight.
a little bit of my own story of like, I'm giving up on this meditation stuff. I'm never going to be able to meditate. Forget it. And then it came.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And it's so true. And I think you're right. It's that point where you think it's not working, but it is. It's working so deep down inside. And that's the point where you meet the major frustration, perhaps because what is working is causing a conflict between it, the new thing, and your own foundational beliefs and perspectives on life, and that inner conflict, even if you're not aware of it, even if you're like, just going about my life, deep down inside that is happening and affecting your unconscious mind, affecting you. So you've got this inner conflict, and that would drive you, around the bend. It would definitely want to make you throw up your hands and, let go of everything. And I guess that ultimately, that probably led to the sense of the Buddhist concept of surrender and non-attachment, didn't it? So he had it. All he had to do was go and sit under that tree and let it come up.
Yeah, but he had to do all the stuff.
I love that. I love the way how you've related that to your own life, because I think there will not be a single person listening in who hasn't experienced that moment of going, that's it, I cannot do this anymore. I've had enough. I'm getting nowhere with this. and that can be a disastrous point. And if you could only look 3 days ahead when you go, oh, actually, oh, wow, yeah, oh, look at this. This is different. I can do this. That breakthrough. Oh, you got the breakthrough, thinking back to your dream with all those break-ins as well. Maybe another reflection then. Mm-hmm. How did you find the publishing process of your book? Painful, yeah.
The cover yeah. It's painful. It's one of those things. It's like, I used to be a graphic designer many years ago, but I don't have all the stuff I don't have the software, etc., etc. But it's almost worth relearning for the amount of that I have to go through. It's the same as the first book. But once it's done, I kind of think of it like, I haven't had any children, but you have a baby. It's painful, but then you forget it.
Yes.
And it's wonderful and you're happy. It's kind of like,
it's exactly like that with the book. In your evenings, when you're doing your art, and you're highly disciplined with that, and discipline is part of a spiritual practice anyway, I guess, but you do describe yourself as doing your art because it enriches your spiritual connection, you say in your bio. So do you want to talk a little bit more about your art and why, for you in particular, why you do art as a tool to enrich your spiritual connection?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's a very Buddhist thing to do. It's you let go of this idea of yourself and you place all your attention on something else. And you're completely in the moment. And you're in a state of flow and trust. I try not to judge when I'm doing my work. I try to just enjoy and I do enjoy the experience of it. So yeah, it is a spiritual practice. It's a meditation for me.
A meditation, yeah. And would you like to roughly describe the type of art that you're engaged in at the moment? I know it changes all the time.
Well, it's been fairly, in the last since I've moved in this place, actually, in the last 2.5 years or so, I've got a series of works which I'm calling the chakra heart pods. So they're all based on chakras. Like the chakras are wheels, but they're represented often by lotuses and lotus petals. So it's kind of like that. quite simple imagery, but there's a lot of detail. And
Yes.
in the detail, that is the focus and the repetition and the concentration and the meditate. So the detail is very important.
Yes.
And it's interesting because when I went to art school back in the 90s, that kind of work was really boo-boo. Like detail was like, no, you don't do detail. You're loose and you're free and you flat, which I used to do and love. So I'm doing the exact opposite of what I was taught, and I'm loving it.
That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So I love that. The opposite to what you were taught, evolving things along a long way. Yeah. I've got a little couple of questions to ask to finish. And one is, it's a very simple question and therefore probably really hard to answer. You know, you've had this life of yoga practice, a long life of yoga practice. If you could pick out like the number one thing that you feel it has taught you, what would it be?
Peace of mind.
Beautiful. So that compared to the anxiety that you mentioned before that you had, yes, peace of mind. And one other one, if you, this a part of this book is dedicated not only to yoga practitioners but to yoga teachers. And you know, you are an educator for yoga teachers. So what would be your number one piece of advice for a brand new yoga teacher that's finished their teacher training and they've got some classes lined up to teach? What would be, as an educator and mentor and the author of Buddhism for Yogis, what would be your number one piece of advice for that person walking into their first class?
It's not about you. It's about the teachings.
Oh, how many classes have all of us been to in yoga where we would like to have reminded the teacher about that? That's brilliant. That is so lovely. Before I ask you how people can contact you, is there anything else that you would like to talk about or bring into our discussion for our lovely listeners? About your book or...
Um, hmm. No, I think I've said plenty.
You said plenty and it's been absolutely lovely. And if people want more than plenty, they can read your book and then they can read the book before that and they can visit your site and look at some of your paintings. And your site is, what's your website address?
BarbaraCourtille.com. So Barbara Courtille, all one word, BarbaraCourtille.com.
That's lovely. And I'll put that in the show notes and in the associated blog as well. Thank you. That was lovely. I really enjoyed talking with you about all these things. I've known you for a long time through your work and was so delighted when you brought out both books, but particularly this lovely one here. And it's been great to have this conversation. So thank you for bringing your dream.
Thanks for having me, Jane. And thanks for all your insight with the dream. That's been really helpful. As always, you're amazing. Your intuition is spot on always.
Thank you. I enjoyed that conversation with Barbara and I hope you did too. I'm sure that you did. Just a reminder of how you can contact her. Her website address is barbaracourtille.com. That's BarbaraCourtille, all one word, barbaracourtille.com. And I'm sure that you could just also Google Buddhism for Yogis and you'd find it on Amazon. I do recommend buying it. So it really is a lovely book. If you would like to be a guest on the Dream Show, go to janeteresa.com, my website. That's Jane Teresa without an H, and go to the menu and find podcasts and you'll see details about how to become a guest on the show there. Also, if you like enjoying this, particularly the new format where our guests are no longer anonymous, and you've got an idea for either a particular person that you would like me to have on the show, or you've got an idea for the kind of subject matter that you would like me to find somebody to represent on the show, do drop me an email or contact me through my contact page at janeteresa.com, and I'd love to hear from you. To make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes, please hit the follow button at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That if you normally listen on my website, that's fine, but please pop over to Apple or Spotify, search for the show, search The Dream Show with Jane Teresa Anderson, and hit follow there, because your follow helps more people to discover the show in the first place. The more follows a show has, the more it becomes available, and the more it's presented as an option to people who are looking for something new to listen to. So go to Apple or Spotify and hit follow. That would be great. Thank you. And thank you also for listening to yet another episode of The Dream Show. You can find out more about my services, books and courses at janeteresa.com. Have a beautiful day. I'm Jane Teresa Anderson.